Good morning, everyone. Let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. We're so grateful to have you here with us. I don't know if you can hear me. Hard to compete with the Christmas music.
I can hear you. We're getting started in
Okay.
2 minutes, folks. We'll let the lobby fill for a sec.
That's how it goes. Whenever it snows, the world is your snowball just for a song. Get out and roll it along.
All right. It's a yummy, yummy world in the snow time. You were just treated to my personal favorite holiday song. So, and I live in Maine and it is a marshmallow world. So, thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to dive in. I know folks are still joining the lobby a little bit. Take a moment in the chat to introduce who are you, where are you calling in from? Let us know what organization you're with. And today we're
Brian,
gonna
they're saying the chat is disabled. Okay, wait. Oh, you guys, maybe they just changed the permissions. Can you try now? Did I fix it from the host panel? Can can you all see? Yeah! Oh
Hey!
my gosh, never have I solutioned during a Zoom call before, so we're starting off strong.
That's amazing. Well, I feel like this is like a good kind of theme and cadence to even just start the webinar because we are coming to you live and authentic and raw as our true imperfect selves, tech snafus and all. This actually connects beautifully to the one major roadblock that we want to help identify and help you solution for 2026. And I'll give you a little sneak peek. Maybe the tech snafus have to do a little bit with the stress and the pressure and the anxiety that I'm feeling this morning. Uh, so we're so excited you're here. Thank you, thank you. We also know how busy and stressful this time of year is. So the fact that you took an hour from your day to join up with us, and we also hope that part of this, and Mallory's going to kick us off here in a moment in a special way. We hope that this session also provides you just an opportunity to pause, an opportunity to reflect, an opportunity to breathe in the midst of all of the complexities, highs and lows that I think come with this time of year. So, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Before we dive in and before I hand the reins over to Mallory, I did just want to do a quick little bit of context setting. My name's Bryan with Practivated. I am our head of marketing. Mallory, our CEO and founder, and we are the fundraising readiness platform. We help fundraisers prepare from taking all of those great insights that you get from your CRM, your wealth screening tools, the automations you're running, and actually drive them to impact by helping strengthen the one key strength and gift that our sector has that is innately human, and that is the gift of creating beautiful, flourishing, impactful human connections and conversations. We do this through conversation simulations, a real-time, always-on AI coach, and also are able to give fundraisers and leaders insights into the leading metrics that tell us the strengths and weaknesses of the conversations that we're having in real time. So I just wanted to set the stage by just providing some context on our lens and our point of view and what we've built and why. But this session is going to be more holistic than this. Mallory, do you want to kick us off with a little exercise?
Yeah, sure. And the other thing I'll say is that Brian and I are both fundraisers and have also both managed fundraisers. So at our core, like we've sat in the seats that you are either sitting in or have sat in. And so a big part, we won't spend too much time on our bios or background, but a big part of what we want to share with all of you today is that in some of the insights that we've learned being at Practivated, having some access to data that we've never had access to before, we've realized as fundraisers and managers, oh my gosh, if I had known this as a manager, it could have really changed how I led and supported my staff. And so we're going to be talking through insights and opportunities and actions that extend far beyond Practivated and that you can take away and start to implement with your team tomorrow. Whether you're on Practivated or not, we really want to make this applicable. We know what a hard time it is right now. End of year is always particularly stressful. I was on a call the other day with some partners and I said, where are we at? Are we in, and so maybe you can tell me in the chat, are we in the senioritis side of end of year, or are we in the like hustle and get everything done by December 31st? We're still feeling pretty anxious side of end of year. So you can give me like a 10 if you're in the like scattered spray fire doing all the things hustle, and a 0 if you're closer to senioritis and you are very lucky that you clicked attend on this webinar because you're trying to do a lot of nothing right about now. Okay, and I love the variety that we have here today, and the honesty and the vulnerability. And I'll be honest, some days right now I'm at a 1 and other days I'm at a 9 and I'm just ping-ponging back and forth. Which we're going to actually talk about today because a lot of that has to do with exactly what's happening at this time of year, which is our stress response is on in bigger ways, and sometimes that has us in a hyperactive mode, and other times that actually has us feeling in more of that like paralysis, turning off mode. And so what we actually wanted to start with today was just like a moment to get grounded. A big part of my work is the relationship between how we feel and what we do. And a lot of folks are coming here in hustle mode. A lot of folks are coming here maybe like, I don't know how I got here or why I got here, but I'm here. And wherever you came from is totally great, but we want to put you in like the best place possible to be able to engage in and absorb and learn from our content. And a big part of what makes us open to learning and listening and all of those things is what's happening inside of our body. So I wanted to actually give you a tool that I encourage you to use right now to get grounded in this webinar, but it's also something you can use on an ongoing basis and with your team anytime you're feeling stressed or scattered and need to sort of ground down in your energy, come back into your body, and be able to be more present for whatever you're a part of. So I don't even know, there's probably a name for this exercise. I don't actually know what it is, but what I want you to do is to have place both feet on the floor. And if you're able to take off your shoes, if you're in a place where that's appropriate, you could do that too. And I want you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths just through your nose, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Make sure that those deep breaths are actually coming into your belly, not your chest. When we say, oftentimes we'll say, take a deep breath, and we take a deep breath and our chest gets really big. That's actually still a stress breath. It's super interesting. I just learned this. So if you need to put your hands to make sure that your belly's expanding, but in through your nose and out through your mouth just a few times. And then bring your consciousness to your feet. They should be planted firmly on the ground. And maybe you start with your right foot and just notice, is every part of your foot touching the ground? Like wind your consciousness around the outside of your whole right foot, around. Is every toe touching your heel? Every part of your foot touching the ground. And then move your consciousness to your left foot. And notice, is every part of your left foot solidly touching the ground? Just wind your consciousness around, making sure that that left foot is planted solidly on the ground. Take a few more deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Really focusing on both feet planted firmly on the ground. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes slowly. Maybe wiggle your fingers and toes. Notice how you feel. If it changed your energy number at all. This is a really great, right now I walked you through this in like a full kind of like closed eyes, deep breaths, but this is actually a tool that I use in the middle of meetings all the time. Like if I'm in a really stressful meeting or someone's coming at me with a lot of nervous energy or a lot of anxiety, I use it in parenting. And I'm just like, notice your feet. That's like my little trigger to myself. Notice your feet, pay attention to your feet. And it's just a really great way to have us sort of stay in and come back into our bodies. If you want to share how you're feeling or any impact that you had. And it's also a tool that I've always taught my fundraisers because it's particularly wonderful during donor meetings. If you're feeling flustered or nervous, maybe navigating some tension or a hard question, it's a really great way to help a fundraiser stay down regulated so that they can be present and connected and really using all of those fundraising skills that they have in that conversation, even though it's stressful, which is really at the core of some of what we're going to talk about today. Bryan's feeling warmer,
Amazing.
calmer.
I was feeling warm and fuzzy and calm and slinking a little closer to the couch. Amazing. What a nice way to kick this off. So, without further ado, I guess before I dive in, the last thing that I want to say to everybody here is that I really want to emphasize that like what we've put together today to for Mallory and I to talk through, this is an open conversation that you're a part of as much as we are. So drop thoughts, reflections, questions, insights into the chat. If you disagree or you have a frustration, drop it into the chat. Like we wanna be able to pull on what you're thinking and feeling throughout this conversation today as well. So we want you to know that there is a very much an open dialogue here um, before we begin. So without further ado, I think kind of the one thing we've been teasing is we've really honed in on across all of the strategic, relational um, challenges, your goals, your tech, like whatever it might be. Like we have a laundry list of all of our challenges. We inherently believe here at Practivated that there is one core challenge that's actually impacting all of the other challenges that we face. And so we want to unpack this roadblock, and it's going to come as as no surprise. And I think before we get into it, I want to unpack it a little bit, and it is readiness. And I want to caveat that when we say readiness, it isn't what you might think it is at face value, right?
Mm.
You whether you've been fundraising for a year or 25 years, right? You might say, no matter what season you're in, that you're fully equipped and prepared and ready to have a conversation with a donor. So I think like the how it might hit at face value is a bit different on how we're thinking about it. So I'm kind of curious, Mallory, like, can you frame up readiness for us a bit?
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, Holly Wells, our team member, who I think is here in the chat, said this so wonderfully yesterday when her and I were talking about it, which she's like, okay, but like, everybody has to wake up in the morning and get ready, right? Every incredible professional athlete has to get game ready, right? And it doesn't mean that their skills aren't there, that they aren't already an amazing basketball player or tennis player. But readiness is really about how sort of how ready we are for performance. And I also have a problem saying the word performance because I don't think about fundraising as a performance in the sense that it's a show and we're embodying a character or anything like that. But I think about it in terms of performance, actually more similar to sort of like how we think about, athletics potentially, which is, readiness is the gap between kind of we know what to do and we are fully able to do it despite what's happening around us or the stressors or the pressure or the kind of divergence that we might get thrown in a conversation, right? You might say, okay, I'm a confident fundraiser, or this fundraiser tells me they're confident when they're getting on the phone with donors. But what happens to their skills when the donor says, how'd you get my phone number? Do they still have them? Are they still ready to handle that situation? Are they still ready to navigate that moment? And that kind of conversational readiness, at least, has to do with building muscle memory around a variety of different scenarios. So there's different types of readiness. That's conversational readiness. When we think about readiness, we think about campaign readiness. Maybe that's messaging readiness. So even the most experienced fundraisers, you're launching a new campaign, you have all different types of messaging, ways you want your fundraisers communicating about your organization or about a challenge that you just went through or a leadership change. And so, is everybody ready to communicate about something that's going on in the organization in the same way at scale? Do they all feel ready to do so? Then there is sometimes like then there is obviously skill readiness, especially when we have fundraisers transitioning into different types of fundraising. Maybe they're moving into planned giving or complex gifts or more transformational giving, right? And then there is really that skill readiness piece. And then the other thing I will say is that when fundraisers are maybe willing to be a little bit more vulnerable, and this again is not about being a new fundraiser. To me, it's really about when fundraisers are willing to be a little bit more vulnerable. We and managers hear all the time fundraisers say, I'm just not ready to have that conversation yet.
Hmm.
Right? And sometimes they'll say it by saying the donor isn't ready. But I have also heard fundraisers say, like, I'm not ready. I'll be ready when? I'll be ready when I can get that one pager about X, Y, and Z. I'll be ready when this has happened in the relationship already. And so that they are signaling that they don't feel ready. They might be pointing to a different reason for why they don't feel ready, but often that's an indicator that there actually is a readiness gap inside of them as well. Because we know when a fundraiser really is ready, they can have a conversation with the donor about anything, no matter what perfect deck or one pager or sponsorship packet they have. And so we are really thinking about readiness to help sort of like uncover those both like internal and external blocks that hold fundraisers back from being able to take the most effective and important action with the donor.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think another layer of readiness that we were talking about yesterday was also readiness not being something that's one and done, but it's always evolving, it's always shifting. And I reflect back on my time in the sector as a fundraiser. I was a part of a campaign that some of you might recognize or know. It was called Coney 2012, and it was a campaign that went viral. We were trying to end a child soldier conflict in Central Africa, and because the campaign went viral, we went from being a small nonprofit that was building really relationships one to one to few, and all of a sudden we were having a one to many conversation overnight where misinformation was rampant. And all of a sudden, and at the time we had representatives from our company taking stages all over the country talking to tens of thousands of people every day. And all of a sudden, like our readiness actually tanked because we were not prepared for how to scale a unified, clear message
Mm,
on a one to many global scale. We went from
mhm,
like small grassroots nonprofit to like global spotlight overnight. That is
mm,
something that we were not ready or prepared for. So like
mm,
readiness had to happen in real time in rapid click. And Mallory and I were also talking about just like look at what's happened in our world this week. And there are nonprofits and there are fundraisers that are on the front lines in the wake of some horrific tragedies where pressure is escalating in a way that they couldn't have anticipated this year end. And this is why readiness is so important.
mhm. Yeah, and I'd be curious. I don't know if folks want to share in the chat, but one thing that has been really interesting as we've been capturing metrics inside Practivated and even thinking about how we measure things. I remember when my CTO said, okay, we're going to measure confidence and we're going to measure a fundraiser's confidence over time in the platform and just how it grows. And I said, "Oh, this is so much more complicated than you think it is because fundraising isn't delivering that same script over and over again, right? It's not a speech where you say the same exact thing every single time. And so your confidence can just be measured in a linear fashion. The dynamics of the conversation, the contextual differences, the personality differences of the donor, all of those things impact our ability to express our skills, right? And so I'd be really curious, for folks if they want to share in the chat, what fundraising skills do you feel like get the most lost or inaccessible when you or your fundraisers are feeling that stress and pressure? Like, what do you feel like you lose the most access to? Is it creativity? Is it critical thinking? Is it deeper collaboration? Because all of those things are really normal, right? And we'll explain in a second how stress and pressure can actually get in the way of that. But I'd be super curious for folks to share, like, and this doesn't mean that you don't have the skills. Oh, thank you for sharing that,
Paralyzed.
Judy. Totally normal. We end up paralyzed, right? So that's when folks aren't emailing a donor because they don't know what to say, what to do, what that next step would be, right? It gets in the way of feeling like we're clear, that we have clarity, and that gets in the way of our readiness. What are some other things that skills that you feel like get the most kind of sidetracked or removed from your toolbox when you are when stress comes into play that maybe makes you less ready to have those donor conversations?
Yeah,
Bryan, what? Yeah.
and as you're thinking about it, I just wanted to call out something that the data actually is showing us and telling us, which we published this at the end of this year in our State of Donor Conversations report, was that fundraisers that are exceptional in their
Mm,
skill sets and what they do, in their art, in their craft, in their delivery, when you add a stress response, that actually leads to a decrease in performance. Details get missed. We fumble the ask,
mm,
right? Like things get rushed over. We move too quickly where we need to slow down and be more present with a donor as it comes to how we're articulating our program impact. You name it. But these
mhm.
stress responses, no matter how skilled you are actually resulting in a decline in performance.
Yeah. So we're getting a lot of stuff privately sent to us. So I'm going to read some of them out. Deep people feel like they lose the ability for deep insight gathering questions. They rush past some of those deeper moments of connections when they feel stressed or uncomfortable. We had somebody share with me privately, they get more transactional. They lose the transformational conversation to go deeper because they get overly transactional and feel more of that scarcity mindset. Somebody said that we end up defaulting to donor-centric values versus leaning into communicating in a community-centric way, right? So that also can be more related to some of those like transactional ways, or we're brought back to these like modes of operating that maybe when we're our most intentional selves, we've tried to do things differently, but stress has us go right back into our preconditioned tendencies. That makes perfect sense. Holding space for
Uh,
donors' emotions. Oh my gosh, sorry, Bryan. Go ahead. There's just so
no,
much
no,
good stuff coming
no,
in.
no, no. Read this one because I wanted to respond to Ellen.
Okay. So, holding space for a donor's emotions. Sometimes this can be when it feels like they are nitpicking or getting stuck on one data point. Yes, 100%. And just being able to like dig into that emotion instead of maybe I'm not saying you do this, Ash, but like I've, gotten defensive or felt like I had to get into my pitch then and kind of defend everything instead of just saying like, tell me more about why that feels so, why that really like rocked you in this way, right? Exactly. Being able to lean into that discomfort in a way that deepens connection. Such a good example.
Yeah, Ellen provided like an incredible sort of like other side of the coin, which is extremely successful campaigns and success closing all like your gifts and bringing in a net new like massive contribution from a major donor also triggers a stress response because now the accountability for stewardship becomes more challenging on a small team that has no bandwidth. It also presents new challenges for, are we ready to continue to communicate the need in 3 months?
Mm,
Because just because we had a spike in contributions in December doesn't reduce the fact that we have evolving needs for our mission come February, March, and April, right?
mm.
So even like performing at a high level has trickle down effects in terms of what it means for our readiness in 3 to 4 months.
I mean, Bryan, I'm sure you've heard this, and maybe folks are willing to admit this in the chat or not, but one of the things I hear the most on the coaching side that I was surprised about was people who were worried about how much they were raising because then they'd have to do it again. And that is such a that is such a readiness sign, right? Because even though they wanted to raise that amount of money, that was the goal, they actually didn't feel ready to have
Mm.
then the pressure year after year of hitting those types of fundraising numbers, right? So this is another example of that sort of like readiness gap.
Yeah, and I mean a whole other layer that I'll add into this that adds a stress response, and I'm pulling back from my own experience. Like I felt day to day, I felt personally so much pressure and stress because achieving fundraising goals, like this campaign that went viral that I mentioned, we raised in 5 days 8x more revenue than our historical annual average in individual contributions in 5 days. And so that did a couple things. One, we sort of had like the Oprah effect where it was like, well, Oprah wrote you a check, you don't need me. But the
Mm,
other thing that it did was we made the decision as an organization, which might have been a mistake long term, but we just said we have this influx of money. We made the single biggest wire transfers to our programs in Central Africa than in the history of the organization. We built the first ever child soldier rehabilitation center in Congo. But what did that rehabilitation center do? It added up the ante and the pressure for needing to continue to fund this additional investment in our programs that had scaled, but our fundraising operation hadn't. We just had a
mm,
moment in time where things spiked. And so, as
mm,
a fundraiser, I'm sitting in an office in San Diego, and all I can think about is I'm not hitting my goals in the following months, quarters, years following that
mm,
moment. And it's actually impacting people's lives that
mm,
I'm trying to support. And so there is this guilt, shame, pressure cooker around what's actually at stake in terms
mm,
of what happens if I don't do my job well,
mm.
based upon the increased expectations.
100%. So this is a great time to maybe show the slide around what causes burnout in our sector because for those of you who don't know, I have a book called What the Fundraising and a podcast called What the Fundraising. And a lot of what I've done on the podcast is a research with neuroscientists and behavioral scientists and therapists and psychologists all around what happens in our brain and body when we fundraise. Because one of the things I started to find as a coach was that people were burning out even when I was able to get them to not overwork, right? We attribute burnout a lot of time to overwork. And I'm not saying you're not overworked. You're like, okay, bye, Mallory. Like we are overworked. I know, I know. Okay. But what I found was that even when I was actually able to help clients not overwork, they were still burning out. And so this was about 5 years ago. And I was like, okay, there's something else here. What is causing burnout in fundraising? It's not just overwork. And so I went down this very deep research rabbit hole with all these different scientists and trying to understand the neuroscience of all of these things. And that's where my background, why we keep talking about the stress response is because it has such a huge impact on how your fundraisers can do next year. And so when we're talking about removing the roadblocks to them being able to be their best fundraising selves and raise the amount that you want them to raise next year, we're going to be talking about strategy around that. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that unfortunately we double down on as managers and fundraisers and leaders because we've been taught that that's what moves towards performance. But actually, those are the things that breaks a fundraiser's ability to perform because they increase their stress response and turn off their capacity for all of the things that y'all just mentioned in the chat, right? So
Mm,
some of the things that I ended up uncovering in this research were that these 5 things really contribute to fundraiser stress, chronic stress, and burnout. One is uncertainty and ghosting, right? And I could have a whole webinar on ghosting and why that dysregulates us and how that breaks our sense of belonging and is just so bad for our nervous system. But same with uncertainty, right? If you're sitting here right now and you're like, and this is true for you too, right? This isn't just true for your fundraisers if you're a manager. All these things are true for all human beings, okay? Fundraising just happens to be this sort of pressure cooker of a situation where all 5 of these things are incredibly present, right? So if you're sitting here and it's December 17th and you're feeling like, I don't really know how this year is going to end, where we're going to hit our fundraising numbers, how we're going to hit our fundraising numbers, that level of uncertainty is really dysregulating. Rejection, right? Obviously, it can be dysregulating. I think we all have been there. Pressure, right? Pressure to meet targets and increasing pressure, really dysregulating activity. Overwork is definitely one of the things, and power dynamics is another. And there's actually one missing from here, which is probably my fault, which is isolation. Isolation
mm,
is also something that dysregulates our nervous system. Now, you might say, wait a second, Mallory, pressure, there's a lot of things in life that give us pressure, and that pressure can be good for us. Yes, stress is not always bad. We need stress. We don't want to live in a world without any stress. Cortisol is a very important hormone to release in the brain. It helps us focus, it helps us take action. The problem is when there's too much of it, right? It's not about not having any of these things. It's about not having too much of these things or all of these things at once without having strategies and support inside your organization to handle them. And the thing that I really want managers to hear is that kind of the worst thing we can do. And if you're like, oh my gosh, this is a gut punch, Mallory, because I do this, I want you to know everything I'm about to say, I have done. Okay. Everything I'm about to say, I have done. So there's no shame here. This is all about like what I've learned that I want to share with you because when I learned it, it changed how I showed up.
mm,
One of the things that we often do because we've been taught to is we double down on some of these things in moments where folks are already in a stress state or already in chronic stress or already inching towards burnout, and we turn up the dial on pressure. Or sometimes even we turn up the dial on uncertainty, right? We're like our uncertainty and anxiety, energy transfers is contagious. And so we transmit that onto our team members, onto our fundraisers, and then their stress response escalates, their chronic stress escalates. And as that is happening, they are losing the capacity for creativity, connection, critical thinking, collaboration, all of the deep relationship buildings. When our stress response is on, y'all, our brain has 2 jobs: don't die and conserve as much energy as possible. And it turns everything else off in order to accomplish those goals. Okay. And so the reason why this is so important to understand is because we've been taught, maybe give more milestones to increase the pressure, make it a little bit more competitive. And I'm not saying all those things, competition is bad or any of it is bad, but when we're doing it in a moment where your folks are already stressed out, it's actually adding gasoline to a fire and not water. I just went on a whole big little soapbox there. But tell us in the chat. You guys have been great in the chat. Tell us like what's resonating. What are you noticing? Are there any of those areas of that increase stress and chronic stress that you feel like are particularly like you don't know how to get out of. And one thing I do want to say maybe is we are never going to not have those things in fundraising at all, right? The goal is not to not get rejected. Okay. That's a part of fundraising. Okay. Uncertainty is a part of fundraising. We are managing dynamic human relationships that do not work in a perfect little 1 + 1 = 2 situation. These are important parts of this is not going anywhere. What we want to make sure we're not doing is one, adding gasoline to that fire. And two, that we have tools and strategies, which we're going to give you in a moment, to
Hmm.
support your team members with the fact that this is a normal part of fundraising and that's okay. Yes, prioritization is a challenge. So, okay, so interesting. Um, I want to like double click on what Callie just said in there. Prioritization is a challenge too. So one of the things that I wanted that, we don't have enough time to get into so much detail here around is that prioritization, things like prioritization, perfectionism, or like feeling like it's hard to prioritize, perfectionism, all of these things that we see materialize in our organizations are actually stress responses. Our inability
Mm.
to prioritize comes from being in a stress state because when we're in a stress state, we're actually in it's a symptom of flight, and sometimes freeze, right? But oftentimes, where we get stuck with prioritization is we don't have the clarity, we don't have that sort of like grounded enough energy to see things clearly. I always say, like, when you're in stress, you have tunnel vision, right? Everything is like yes, no, binary, good, bad. And it makes it super hard to prioritize. We end up trying to like sequence all these things, but we don't know how to sequence them. And maybe you have like 47,000 tabs open on your computer, right? And you don't know how to prioritize. That actually can be a symptom of flight or freeze. It can be a symptom of we're fleeing the discomfort of any one of those choices. We start to think about prioritizing major donor outreach, and then we actually get really uncomfortable and nervous about what might happen with that. We flee the discomfort of that. And I was joking with Bryan yesterday, we decided to start selling chocolate. And this was me. This was me as a fundraiser. When I got uncomfortable, I was like, oh, I have a new fundraising idea. I'm going to start this program. We're going to start these giving nights. I'm going to get these people. We're going to sell coffee. We're going to sell chocolate. And everything was actually an avoidance and flight strategy
Mm.
to avoid the discomfort of the priorities that actually would have moved my organization the most forward. And this might be a really hard thing to hear, but I actually think when we downregulate, and this is what I see with my clients every single day and what we see inside Practivated every single day. When people can downregulate their nervous system, they can get clear and they know what to do. With some coaching and some support and some of that readiness and muscle memory, knowing what to prioritize first comes. You know it, it's inside of you. But we need the readiness and the capacity to sit in it, to take those actions, to do that thing, to stick with it. In my other work, I talk a lot about how we build these half built bridges. We always build these half built bridges because the discomfort of taking something completely over a bridge in fundraising can be really overwhelming. But we have to be able to sit in that discomfort to actually be able to prioritize.
Mm. Brilliant. Um, I'm curious, Mallory. I would love to move into some solutioning suggestions for fundraising teams and managers and leaders. So, what are some important things for when it comes to managers in terms of how to mitigate some of this on their teams?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think so. Will you bring up that? Well, I guess we don't have isolation up there, but there are three things I would think about related to the stress response in particular, and sort of how we avoid throwing gas on it and actually create more structures for support. So one is the things we can control, right, as managers, is providing more a higher sense of control, maybe versus uncertainty. So when we project our teams like, I don't know what's going to happen with that donor. I have no idea, and I don't know what we'll do if they don't give that gift. Those types of conversations can really, really increase that uncertainty versus if we're able to say, hey, listen, we know the leading indicators of what lead to transformational giving in our organizations. We know that when we're doing X and Y and Z, we have this type of likelihood that it's going to result in blank. And so, what we're going to do to increase our feelings of control and more certainty is we're going to do a lot more of X, Y, and Z with a lot more people. And that's how we're going to increase our certainty that we hit our goals, right? So as a manager, we can do these things. It does require us knowing those leading indicators, right? One of the things that creates so much uncertainty for fundraisers is that we tell them build these transformational relationships, build these deep relationships with donors, but then we only measure the money that sometimes
Mm.
doesn't come for 12 to 18 months. So for 12 to 18 months, you and your fundraisers are sitting in uncertainty around, is this relationship gonna happen? or do anything? That is never going to be comfortable, right? Like that is never going to be comfortable. And so we can address uncertainty by knowing, measuring leading indicators, talking about those more regularly, doubling down on those activities and measuring those activities and those skills and those conversations in a much bigger way. So that's one thing that managers absolutely can and should be doing. The second is to be really sensitive to pressure and how we apply pressure. And this is more of like my coaching hat on right now. Oftentimes we think that we can kind of like tough love around pressure, right? The fundraiser is feeling stressed, they're feeling nervous, and we think we're like, you can do it. Like you can do it. You've been a fundraiser for 20 years. You know what to do. And we sort of like tough love them into it, right? Because we think it's motivating and we've been taught through a lot of media that it is motivating. But it actually, in a moment where they are stressed, is not helpful. What you want to be doing instead is actually acknowledging and validating how they feel. That is what's going to downregulate their nervous system and be able to be more open about meeting those targets, right? So it's saying, hey, it makes perfect sense that you're feeling stressed right now. These are big numbers. This was a big goal for the year, right? It makes anybody in your position right now would be feeling stressed around this, right? It's December 17th. That makes total sense, right? And just giving some space to acknowledge and validate how somebody feels is enough to like open them up to the next, question, right? Or the next step. What's something that you think you could do that would get you one step closer to that goal, right? It makes total sense that you're feeling how you're feeling. What's one thing that you feel like you could do that would get you one step closer to that goal? What's one thing that I could do as your manager to support you with one more step towards that goal? Right? But you're starting from that place of acknowledging and validating, not kind of overriding their emotional state to have them just like, give it some grit. Because listen, y'all, if we could bully ourselves into effective action, we'd all be doing a lot better right now. But turns out that strategy doesn't work. Okay. And it feels counterintuitive to be compassionate with yourself and with and because we're like, oh, maybe that's going to be demotivating, or I don't know how we learned all these things, but actually that acknowledgement, validation, all those things, super, super important. The other thing I want to say here and this is very particularly true for positional leaders, anything you want to be doing with your team, you need to be doing with your staff. You can't say to your staff, it's okay to make mistakes, right? And then hold yourself to perfectionism, right? You can't acknowledge and validate how your team is doing. You're never going to be able to show up with those managerial and coaching skills in the way that you want to if you aren't self-coaching and showing the same self-compassion to yourself. You're going to be resentful, actually. Maybe you'll say the thing to your team member, but you won't feel it, and they won't feel it either, right? And so you are a model, right? Bryan and I had a super interesting conversation a few months ago. I made a big mistake. at Practivated. And we were kind of rehashing it and going over it. And I said to him, I don't know if you even remember this, but I said, hey, I have told everybody on this team, your goal is to move fast. That's going to come with mistakes. That's what I just did. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it because then I'm doing the opposite of what I'm telling all of you to do. And
Mm.
so it is what it is, right? Like it is what it is. And so I really want to share that with positional leaders because I think that's super important for how you think about implementing some of these things with your team. And that level of like creating more certainty and sense of control. These are the two biggest things I think managers have control over. That, and then how we deal with and support around the feelings of pressure are like the two biggest levers related to this list that managers have access to immediately. And then the third, because it's not up here, so I forgot, is isolation, bringing your people together. And so we're actually going to give you a strategy in a moment that we recommend that sort of brings all of these pieces together. But isolation increases our stress response and feelings of chronic stress and burnout. And so the more we can help our fundraisers feel less isolated with each other, with us, and isolation doesn't mean physical proximity. It actually is like emotional isolation. So some of that acknowledgement and validation that I said before, that's also part of what helps people feel less isolated. They don't feel alone in their doubt. They don't feel alone in their worry. They don't feel alone in that pressure of the weight of the organization riding on their shoulders, right? Fundraising can be so isolating, right? Just like leadership. But there are things that we can do to really reduce isolation by bringing people together, solutioning together, talking about leading indicators together, solving some of these challenges together, just having more open dialogue around stress and capacity and all of those things help reduce those feelings of isolation.
100%. And I think something else, I think this like leads beautifully into, I think like our core why at Practivated, because there's another layer to this, which is part of the cycle that Mallory was talking through a moment ago, comes through lack of clarity or uncertainty. And so you are all out in the world having, real world human conversations with prospects and donors, corporate funders, etc., and against some very high pressure goals. And managers have no way to understand from like from a data point perspective, how are all of those, like especially if you manage a large team and several teams, how are all of my individual fundraisers performing? And so there's a layer of uncertainty on the managerial level.
Mm,
That uncertainty trickles down into the work that individual fundraisers are performing,
mm,
which actually perpetuates the feeling of uncertainty from the manager as it comes
mm,
to hitting our goals. And so we are like in this vicious cycle of uncertainty. And I say
mm,
this because I think it is the foundational why at Practivated. And
mm,
when you get a fundraiser, and I just want to caveat this, like this isn't a sales pitch, but it kind of ties into something that we want to offer you, a suggestion that can help. It is when you get a fundraiser in an environment where you're meeting with an AI coach or you're in a simulated donor conversation and you are role playing your practice in a way that can be measured, it eradicates that uncertainty because it gives us core data points around growth and feedback that can
mm,
help someone close the gap, that can help them progress to hitting the goal. So when you eliminate the uncertainty, you actually provide an environment that increases performance and readiness. And so
mm,
this was like the big why behind this is why we built Practivated. So my caveat here is you don't actually need Practivated to do this right now today. So we have a suggestion, and we're gonna help you and guide you a little bit, um, because I'm gonna provide some resources after this call. So I'll send you all an email with a few things that can kind of help you ground this. But here's a suggestion. And as maybe uncomfortable as this might feel, because I think I know there's varying feelings about how we all feel about role play, but tag a team member, get on Zoom, and put yourself in a position to do a role play conversation for 5 minutes with that team member. You're the fundraiser, they're the donor, and record it. And take that recording transcript from Zoom, and this is what we'll provide you. I will follow up with a AI prompt that you can use. Upload that conversation to your generative AI tool of choice. Here we have ChatGPT featured, and plug in the prompt that I'll send you and use it to collect feedback and to help score the health and strength of that conversation and see what you learn. I think that's part one. Part two is we want to take this a step further. We want to try to help the best as we can. And so we're going to be opening up a limited number of spots on Mallory's calendar in January, where we're going to allow up to 15 folks, first come first serve, to book time with her and do a mini coaching session with the feedback that you get from this prompting exercise. So I'll follow up via email after this with a little bit of a guide, step by step, how you do this. And we're really interested and curious to see what results come from it. What do you learn? What do you see about yourself? What do you learn about the opportunities in your team, etc.? So again, I'll follow up with all the details, but sink into this and sit with it. And again, like we're trying to solve something that's innately human, and because it's innately human, it's innately complex. But we hope that we can give you tangible opportunities to start to lean in and dig in and use the tools that we have at our disposal to help us reduce some of that uncertainty and bring in more clarity on how we can kind of free ourselves of this roadblock next year. Because again, I think as we see it, out of all of the challenges that you face, and they are many and they are nuanced, this is the one that will ripple through everything you do day to day. And it's our goal and it's our intention to help you solve for that, to make this easier, to make your work feel calmer, more impactful, more collaborative, more fruitful because of the way in which we show up and how we work with each other.
And Bryan, can I just add, one of the reasons we really wanted to give you like a super tangible activity that you could take away from this that would have a big impact on your fundraisers, but also you as a manager, right? This is a big part. It's interesting with Practivated, right? People are like, who's your ICP or who? And it's like, well, we're trying to serve fundraisers and their growth and their confidence and their clarity at the same time as we're serving managers with their growth and their confidence and their clarity around what's happening with their fundraisers and a big part of that is understanding these leading indicators, right? And opportunities for growth and refinement and gaps to improve that readiness. And so part of this exercise is both on the fundraiser side, giving them that role play muscle memory experience with with some feedback. Bryan's not going to be allowed to give you the Practivated prompt for feedback, but he can give you something where you can put in some of your own pieces, but that will get the fundraiser some feedback that gives them a higher level of confidence, clarity, more grounded energy, allow them to be more regulated and go into a conversation with more confidence, right? So that this activity accomplishes that on the fundraiser side. And then for you as the manager, it gives you insight into some of the biggest gaps and challenges that your fundraiser is facing in building those connected relationships so that you can improve your one-on-ones with that fundraiser, so that you can think about training differently across your team, because you could compare this if you have all of your fundraisers doing this with each other. You could compare the transcripts and see trends across your entire different team. And so those 15 minutes with me are really with me as a coach, right? To say, okay, here are the insights from you doing this activity. Here is, as a coach, how I'd prioritize integrating these insights into how you think about the year. And then related to those stress indicators, this activity is specifically, just like Practivated, designed to deal with uncertainty, designed to deal with a sense of control that increases our resilience to pressure, to increase feelings of connectedness that reduce isolation. So we tried to create this one kind of really robust opportunity for y'all to take back and do that we believe is really going to help you on the managerial side for 2026, but also immediately support your fundraisers to improve some of their skills and growth and confidence and clarity moving into 2026. So this is, I try to solve too many problems at once often, but I think the reason we are really excited about this activity and the reason that we built Practivated is because we actually do believe that with integrated solutions like this, we can be solving multiple fundraising challenges at once to drive better results, and not just the financial results, but the feelings that your fundraisers have, their resilience in their roles, your resilience as a manager. We want to address the dual crises of declines in giving across the sector with fundraiser burnout. We believe there is one solution to do both of those things at the same time, and it really starts with an activity like this.
Amazing. Before we wrap, I just want to let everyone know if there are any outstanding questions, things that you want us to dive into. We have a few minutes left. We are happy to take any questions that you have. So let us know in the chat. And, I think just, my parting word is, as again, how we started the conversation, like as a former fundraiser, wherever this finds you on the scale of 0, you are just like coasting it into relaxation time and time with family and friends and celebrating over the next couple of weeks. Or if you're on the other end of the spectrum and the pressures feel really high, we care deeply about your experience, how you're showing up. We see the work that you're doing. We see the vitalness of your role in fulfilling that work. And we just want you to know that we are cheering you on. And we hope that this end of year season, both personally and professionally for your missions, gives you and provides you what you need to transition into the new year and to have a great 2026. And we'll be right here, ready to support and ready to continue the conversation together as we move into 2026. But just know that we are on the sidelines. We're cheering you on. And we feel and know what you're walking and moving through. And thanks so much for spending time with us here today.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We appreciate you so much and are so grateful for the work that you do.
Amazing. We'll finish strong, y'all. That is a wrap. You'll hear from me shortly via email. And thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a sugar date. What if spring is late? In winter, it's a marshmallow world. It's a marshmallow world in the winter, when the snow comes to cover the ground. It's time for play. It's a whipped cream day. I'll wait for it the whole year round.